Hey guys. This is part 5 of What If Naruto Can Use Chakra Chains. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 17 Red. His head was pounding as the tremors of veins pulsing on his skull slowly died down. He picked himself out of the rocks from where he crashed in the street, and was surprised that he hadn't broken anything in his body. He rubbed his eyes as he stood up, feeling them tickle a little. People still scrambled away, and he saw his sword stabbed in the ground a few feet from him. It's been a long time since I've seen someone attempt the Chunin in combat. There is a reason people don't do that, Naruto-kun. Naruto looked up to see Itachi and Kisame standing in the opening he made in the wall with his body. Yeah, because people react too slow. But I'm not like other people, I just got to get used to this and make it my own. Oh, and then what will you do after that? Itachi asked, curious. Naruto just tilted his head as Kisame glanced at his partner. Huh! The information we have on you show that you are an extremely promising young shinobi with enormous potential, and with what you are trying to learn, if you were to master it, you would quickly become one of the biggest threats in the ninja world easily. But there must be some reason for you doing this, correct? What is your purpose? To lead? To protect? Are you doing this for loved ones? He needed anything to give him a reason to give Naruto a chance to escape. It took 5 seconds before Naruto burst out laughing, causing Itachi's expression to sour. A reason? As if I give a fuck about something like that. I do this because I can and it's fun. I train so that I don't get killed. I live this way because that's the way I survived, and eventually I grew to enjoy it. Doing this for loved ones? I guess I am by default, because at the moment I only have one who falls in that category, and you are trying to take her away from me. His eyes turned orange again with more flecks of red. Itachi's eyebrows furrowed in confusion at the mention of a female, not yet knowing his information was dated. What are you talking about? If you don't know, then figure it out. Naruto grabbed the air in front of them, and visible white lines started to crack through the air. Shotatsu crash. There was a flash before that area of the hotel imploded in a wave of dust. His head snapped up and saw Kisame and Itachi in the air coming down at him. He twitched his wrist, and the sword jumped into his hand. It happened just in time as Kisame crashed on him with his own sword. Naruto grit his teeth as the ground cratered and his knees buckled from holding back the impact before he was overwhelmed and went flying back through a fence wall, but quickly recovered and skidded back to his feet. Kisame hoisted his sword on his shoulder and charged after Naruto. You've got some good things going on in that body of yours, kid, if nothing's broken yet. He would have thought that swinging such a large weapon would have made him slow, but he seemed to be similar to himself in that regard, but better, as Naruto held his sword up to block when Kisame brought his across again, this time like an axe. The impact knocked him away as Naruto's back hit a wall, but Kisame was quickly on him. It was thanks to his reflexes and senses that he was able to react in time. He needed to get rid of that sword, or he wouldn't last long. He started to charge his chakra along the blade, causing it to glow and pulse with lightning as a dull hum echoed from it. It lasted for a second before it began to die down as the shark man's sword started to become animated under its bandages as it squealed like a happy child and grew. Wow, that chakra of yours is sending Samah into a sugar rush. The bandages were torn to shreds, and he could see something that looked like it was made out of dark serrated skin with its own mouth as it grinned at him. In case you didn't know, Samah has the ability to eat chakra. Shit, how could I forget that? He hadn't memorized Kisame's page in the bingo book, but he did know who the man was once he heard his name and saw his appearance. So that also meant he had read about the nature of his sword. The ability of Zabuza's sword was lesser known, but the Samah could be considered its opposite. If I could have a weapon with the ability to absorb chakra with one that could absorb blood, I'd be a walking plague. Even more of an ultimate weapon than I already would be. His arms shook as Kisame pushed him into the wall, causing it to crack. His sword also started to crack against the bracing of the Samah. Blood was drawn as several of the scales of the shark's skin dug into Naruto's chest. Won't be long now. Samah will take that sweet chakra of yours, then you'll be much easier to run off with. Gee, give me that sword. Naruto growled, causing Kisame to look at him like he was crazy. You're either messed up in the head or an idiot to be asking that in the situation you're in. He didn't notice Naruto's eyes flash to a color he hadn't seen on him yet for a second before they went back to blues. "I'll just take a sample then." The dark voice startled him enough that Naruto was able to open his mouth wide and bit onto the sword. Nothing happened for a second before his jaw tightened and Kisame's eyes widened as blood flew, and the sword screamed in pain before Naruto ripped his mouth away, showing a glowing chain of chakra coming out of his throat that had pulled off a big scale of shark skin. The sword could absorb chakra, but it seemed like many things it was still more vulnerable to chakra chains. Naruto retracted the chain, and that's where he fucked up. All the years practicing speeding up his release and reel of his chains, while he could do it slowly in an area as rarely used as his throat, he overestimated it. HCCK. The scale of shark skin was pulled right down his throat as he choked. He stumbled back as Kisame jumped back, not sure what to do as Samahata was damaged, but he was not expecting the kid to just eat part of it either. Looking at the kid's reaction, he had not been expecting it himself. He was breathing hard as he hunched over, saliva pooling out of his mouth onto the ground. Deep breathes, deep breathes. Just tighten your core and heave. His diaphragm expanded as his lungs filled with air as he prepared to upchuck. Gulp. He did the exact opposite of what he intended, and went blue in the face as he realized what happened. The shit actually swallowed it. Itachi, what did you think is gonna happen to him now? Kisame would have been angered at what happened to his sword, but it would heal itself soon enough. He had never seen someone eat part of a sword, let alone his own, however. People live off chakra, so would the piece slowly drain him or lower his reserves like a chakra parasite? He really hoped that it wouldn't just suddenly grow inside of the boy, or that could cause a problem to their mission. Kisame stared at Naruto for a few moments, and saw no alien creature sprouting out of his chest or stomach. Well, he's not dead. Not sure if his body can pass something like that, though. He should probably get to a hospital. Unfortunately, that won't be happening as we have need for him. The state of his body doesn't matter so long as he lives long enough. Itachi decided he had been watching long enough and walked up from behind Kisame towards Naruto, stopping right in front of him. Seeing his feet, Naruto expectantly looked up at him. He was surprised to see Sharingans shaped like some kind of pinwheel staring at him. He choked out a response as his stomach hurt from his stupidity. Is that another stage to the Sharingan? Yes, Naruto-kun, it is. This is the Mangekyo Sharingan, and this is Tsukuyomi. His eyes dulled and dilated as he lost his sense of self, and everything took on a black, red, and white color scheme. He found himself tied up, and suddenly Itachi was in front of him. Welcome to my realm. In here time flows differently, and I am in control of it. Now we need you to come with us, but since you aren't going to willingly, we either need to break you physically or mentally. He gasped as Naruto suddenly found a tanto going through his stomach. Suddenly several more stabbed him every which way. He just looked back at Itachi and laughed crazily as blood dripped from his mouth. Ha ha, now this is nostalgic. I thought you wanted to break me, not send me down memory lane. I went through this in bulk growing up because of the villagers, so physical torture won't work. Itachi grimaced as he knew Naruto's life was bad, but being reminded how even made him uneasy. Very well then. What do you fear? Give me your thoughts. The world shifted, and he found himself back in the village. Buildings were on fire and places of business ravaged, but that wasn't what was making him pale. He saw a young girl running away with seals littering her arms and clothes as she dripped with blood. He felt a familiarity with the girl for some reason, only for him to pale when he saw the whisker marks on her cheeks. Keikuro. He couldn't finish it as the girl tripped, and he saw a large amount of blood coating her backside and saw a blunt object coming out of her backside. His stomach turned when he realized what it was. It was a stump of what was left of her tails. He looked away quickly and breathed hard. Itachi paused for a moment as he looked around, seeing the environment buzz and shake for a second before going stable again. This isn't real. The scene only shifted back in front of his eyes. It grew worse as now a mob of people closed in on the defenseless bijou of a girl. He knew what was coming but still tried to look away, only for the scene to go back in front of his eyes. Stop it! He shut his eyes but could still see it as he started to hear her horrific screams of pain. Stop it! The scene started going in and out as it was covered in static as his nails dug into his skull. His chains vanished, and white eyes glowed at Itachi in silent rage. He was pissed. He was beyond pissed. Out of nowhere time stopped again, and Naruto found himself in an empty grayscale with just a table and 2 seats. He saw Nyo sitting across from him looking at him a bit irritated. So did you just forget what I told you not to do, or do you just not care? Where are we? She was a bit peeved that Naruto responded to her question with an unrelated question. We are in a mental realm inside a mental realm while your body is still frozen in reality. That's several layers right there. It's spiritual inception. Now I believe I told you not to do that little thing you do where you release your spiritual power, right? Because you would die? Remember? Yeah, but dash. What you saw wasn't real, which you figured out, but genjutsu of that level affects your beliefs too. I'll give you a pass and save you this time. You're lucky that time flows differently here. Back in reality, only a fraction of a second has passed, so your body hasn't taken any damage from your loss of restraint yet. She was saving him from going berserk, not from the genjutsu. His chakra already was destroying it on its own, that when his emotions spiked at the end it had just fallen apart. Why does me shifting into that form kill me? She formed several papers out of thin air and handed them over to him. I am a goddess, so there are things I know even if they haven't happened yet. Why, there are a few figures in history who had abilities similar to you. Yours are really one of a kind. I have, however, looked into the future a bit, so I know a few things especially about that power of yours. He looked down at the papers and noticed that they all had a color scheme on them. One was a gradient of blues and the other a gradient of yellow and red. He figured out quickly that they represented his eyes. That made the third sheet of paper easy to figure out, as it was black and white. It was his berserk state. Your actions have affected that interesting bloodline of yours. You were not born with what it is now. No, your actions over time altered it. The chains affected your body as well as separated that dark berserk form from you. That cursed metal in your blood was slowly assimilated into your being, responding well to your chakra even if it's not technically part of the bloodline itself. Having that fox woman seal inside you at an early age likely had an enormous impact as well. That's likely the cause of your unique awareness. Huh. Wait, but Kuromi doesn't have the same sense as me. Right. Nyo gave a small smile as she leaned forward slowly and pointed a nail at his face. Did you know that a fox can find its prey not just by smell but by the magnetic fields the planet and creatures of its interest gives off? How it works is different from yours as you create the fields itself, but it's not too much of a stretch to say this ability of yours stemmed from hers, any? That combined with her ability to sense intent, and you get a very perceptive little child. The fact that it plays so much off your bloodline is a blessing, but I digress. He was going to have to mention all this to Kuromi when he got back. Now, as for the papers, you have probably figured out that they are related to your eyes. The state of your eyes represents what state your bloodline is in. They are not different levels but states, and so inherently are not necessarily stronger than each other. But they can all be mastered. Which means that berserk state of yours can also be tamed. Then the odds of you killing yourself with it would drop tremendously. You need to learn the benefits and consequences of each of your forms and master them. You've done an excellent job growing with limited information. I have no doubt you will grow at a quick rate just from being given direction with this, so I look forward to what you do. Now then, I think it's time you got back to your normal flow of time. Oh, and word of advice, names have power and gives a sense of belonging, so name those eyes of yours too. Before he could say anything else, he was quickly dismissed as he vanished in a gust, kicking up the papers. She gave a long sigh as she reached into her sleeve and pulled out another colored paper that seemed to glow in the low light. He really does have such beautiful eyes. Naruto's eyes snapped back open in the Tsukuyomi. His eyes widened to their limit as he saw the scene that made him remember his rage. A shockwave spun around him and went out, destroying everything in a blinding light. All Kisame saw was Naruto suddenly on his knees, breathing hard and sweating. I know you can make days go by in seconds in that genjutsu of yours, but I literally blinked and it was over. Did you go easy on him? He looked over at his partner and was confused when he saw Itachi holding his eyes in visible discomfort. What happened? He broke past my Sharingan. He removed his hands and realized he was blind. It seemed it was temporary, however, as his eyes slowly came back into focus. But that's impossible. You bastards. Naruto picked himself off the ground. His blue eyes seemed to emanate both power and rage as slitted pupils glowed white. He grabbed his sword again and flushed it with his chakra, making it glow just like his eyes, and slammed it down at them. They had to jump back as with a thundering clap the ground erupted towards them in a wave as the glowing chakra shined from the cracks. They stopped quite a bit away and saw that Naruto had destroyed the streets with that one swing. Feeling a sinking feeling, they looked down and saw the ground under them had turned into a dark mud that they could not walk out of. There was an eruption of smoke on top of a building as Jiraiya appeared, making a show of it as he struck his awkward pose with a random unconscious woman slung over his shoulder like luggage. Yes, that's right, Jiraiya, the gallant toad sage is dash. Itachi. Everyone looked surprised, forgetting about Jiraiya as Sasuke screamed down the street. Fueled by his rage, Sasuke let it cloud his judgment as his Sharingans flared to life and he charged Itachi while forming a Chidori ready to go in for the kill. Damn it, you idiot, why would you announce your presence and then use an assassination technique from that far away? Naruto stabbed his sword in the ground and used it to prop himself up, still catching his breath from the genjutsu. The two cloaked nin weren't S-ranked for nothing, so of course they had a way to survive the oncoming attack. As in, Itachi simply blew a fireball at Sasuke using his extreme hand speed, and Sasuke was not able to dodge it as the Chidori, once it was used in full sprint, only allowed for minor curving in its path. Jiraiya winced as Sasuke screamed in pain getting hit by the fireball and tumbled into the swamp, as well as he squirmed trying to douse the flames. The swamp did help, but now he was also drowning. Jiraiya swore as he was forced to drop the jutsu to save the brat. Using the opening given to them, they decided to retreat for now and quickly took to the roofs. Not being able to chase after them, nor would it have been smart to let them go. He jumped down to the two genin and shivered at the intensity of Naruto's glare. Where the fuck were you? I escaped from my hotel room so that I would attract attention by fighting two S-ranked missing nin where everyone could see me, because I am smart enough to know they would have eventually torn my ass apart. Yet you took over 5 minutes to show up. Jiraiya sweated as he momentarily forgot about Sasuke, who was unconscious from his burns. Sorry kid, but I was getting laid. As if that was an acceptable excuse, Naruto quickly appeared to calm down and looked him over boredly, then at the woman slung over his shoulder. Okay, so that accounts for 2 minutes. The other 3 must have been you somehow convincing her. Jiraiya's ego was severely damaged by Naruto's casual roast. Damn it, brat, she was under genjutsu. I had to dispel it. Before or after the sex? After? Wait. So the girl was brainwashed, and you still had to bribe her to fuck you? The question wasn't answered as Jiraiya stood there frozen, looking as sad as he felt as Naruto now walked forward and around Sasuke, continuing on his way, not in the best mood. Itachi, I will kill you. Even Akami shivered at his tone echoing throughout his head. She quickly figured out what may have been the worst line to cross with him. Knowing what the cause was made her feel conflicted, as she wasn't sure if she should also feel pleased or jealous that it was her other self that he thought so strongly about. Kuromi squinted a bit awkwardly as she tried to give a friendly smile to the council members around her as she sat at the head of the table. The tension was so strong even Danzo felt a bit nervous. Kuromi was trying to be on her best behavior, but that didn't mean everyone wouldn't look at her as either an alien or an abomination. Best behavior? How things have changed. It wouldn't be that long ago where she wouldn't have even tried to be considerate to others for her precious container. Her pride would not have allowed it, but this was a learning experience for her, and her love believed she could do it. She took a deep breath, showing off her canines as everyone's muscles tensed ready to act, and then she spoke. Hi. She did a short wave to go with it, and everyone face faulted. She didn't realize that that was not the appropriate way to greet them, but oh well. Hamura had a vein bulging on his forehead as he shakily pushed up his glasses, trying to hide his irritation. What do you mean hi? More importantly, this cannot be allowed. Danzo, you said you had an astounding choice for Hokage, so we trusted your judgment. Clearly we were wrong to do so. Are you not astounded? Danzo's eye showed the smallest traces of mirth as he sat closest to the fox woman. Well, yes, but dash. Then I followed through on my promise. It was clear he was keeping dialogue with himself short as he glanced over at Kuromi, who seemed to take that as a cue as she looked flustered a bit as she had been staring off into space. Why yes, well, I'm Hokage now. The only way this will be changing would be for one reason. She paused a bit, and people wondered if she was going to say what that reason was, but grew frustrated when she just continued. Now I'm new to this, never studied much, only recently learned how to read, and only recently developed real social skills. I lived a long time as just a monolithic creature. However, I have lived long enough to know how humans are and have a long collection of history buried in my mind. I will be using that to my advantage. As to how this is going to work, it would be wise for all of you to get on my good side. Work with me and I'll work with you. Try to screw me over or my container, again, then I'll probably do something drastic and permanent as a consequence if I'm feeling moody enough. She pointed to the normal mortals as she considered them, making them flinch. Fodder counseled Dash. Civilian. Danzo coughed into his hand, gruffly correcting her. I know what I said. This made a few clan heads smirk despite themselves. I caused a lot of damage to this village around 15 years ago. I was not in control of my actions as I was being controlled by an Uchiha. For the sake of doing so, I will apologize since you flesh dolls are really sensitive about these things, but you lot are the main reason why my host's childhood was hell for the most part. So I dare you to step out of line. She looked over at the clan heads a bit more politely. As for the leaders of those people who are useful. Now Danzo was sure she was calling people by titles in a specific way to instigate outbursts, as the civilians grew more peeved. Since you all are clearly more important than the fodder, since this is a shinobi village, I want you all to bring me up to speed on anything I might have missed in the reports concerning damages to the village as well as any other concerns. For the most part, none of the shinobi that went against my host are alive anymore, and me attacking this village was unfortunate, so for the sake of our positions I hope at the very least you all can conduct your jobs in an efficient and professional manner. Some awkwardly nodded their heads, not expecting her to be so non-hostile, at least outright. The civilians, however, weren't happy as some of the men grew louder. No, you are not our Hokage. If this decision isn't overturned, then we will go straight to the daimyo and Dash. He started choking, as did other civilians, as her eyes shifted blankly towards them. She tilted her head at them, confused, before she realized what was happening. Oh. Sorry, sometimes my killing intent just oozes out slightly. My ears are sensitive to yelling, so I'm used to silencing things that annoy me. She gave an all-too-sweet smile that made them pale. And I don't give a damn if you cry to that figurehead money bank called a daimyo anyway. He can dislike me all he wants, he won't be able to physically remove me from this position. I answer to no one but one man, and he's the one who put me in this position. She sighed longingly, and Choza scrunched his eyebrows, confused. Danzo? Her nails clawed deeply into the table as Danzo actually scooted a bit away from her. Before she could kill one of the clan heads and his friend for his stupid question, Shikaku spoke out. I'm pretty sure Hokage-sama is talking about her host Choza. But the man was already heavily sweating, his eyes open as he tried to lean back and away from the silent stare Kuromi was giving him. Serene face contrasting dynamically with those demonic-looking red eyes gazing into his mind with an invisible glare burning at his soul. He would remember to choose his words carefully after this. Hearing Shikaku, she looked at him after a few seconds, causing Choza to let out a heavy breath of relief as she squinted at the Nara head. Oh, you smell and look just like that one child that's always sleeping. My host praises his intelligence. You would probably also be happy to hear that he has made that mid-level rank you all have. Chunin? Yeah, that thing. He made it, and I plan on formally promoting him not long from now. Shikaku gained a small smile as he nodded his thanks towards Kuromi. Thank you, Hokage-sama. He was already in her good graces simply because he knew his position well and he knew when to be respectful. That reminds me, I need to give out the promotions for these past exams right. Nara-san, since you seem to know how things work, prepare me a list of the damages this village experienced, and how I need to arrange the repairs to take place. She got up and left, making her way to the door. Where are you going? The meeting is not over yet. Kuromi held off at the door and glanced back at Hamura like an annoying child. It's over when I decide it's over. I'm the Hokage, remember? Some of the shinobi shunned out the room, getting the point as Kuromi left, but not before giving Hamura an evil grin. The civilians and elders were left to stew in their own contempt at how things had developed. They were about to round on Danzo for his stupidity, only for the Warhawk to also no longer be present in the room. They were not going to let this go. Not by a long shot. An hour later, Kuromi was sitting back at her desk with an open scroll in her hands. In front of her stood several genin, all looking quite uneasy since her identity and tales were out in the open. Shikamaru, Niji, Rock Lee, and Hinata all stood there with varying expressions, though Lee looked the least uneasy. After a good 5 awkward minutes passed, Kuromi finally spoke. There are a lot of big words in this. Well, I have no idea what half of this means. She swept her arm across the desk, knocking the scroll off it and into the wall, causing them to sweat drop as she folded her hands and smiled at them. Alright then, on to business. The Chunin exams passed, and although its official ending was cut short, several of you still performed well enough to catch eyes. She got up and walked around the table, making half of them go rigid as her aura was commanding even without her doing anything. Knowing who she was, they were wary of even speaking out, or at least the bijou go on a rampage. She wouldn't actually do that so easily, but she would still mess with them if she wanted to. Nara, child, your father already knows, but I am promoting you to Chunin. You are extremely intelligent for a child, and that strategic mind can come in handy in the future. Your skill set isn't that powerful, but it's very technical, and you use it to almost its fullest capabilities within your skill range when you want to. The choice is yours if you want to accept the promotion, though I'd recommend you not refuse. She handed him a Chunin vest and smiled in a friendly way. He grabbed it and looked at it for a moment. He was about to open his mouth to say he didn't want the promotion, only for a chill to go down his back, and for some reason he decided not to say anything wrong. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Smart boy, just like your father. She glided in her step over to the next genin as Shikamaru let out a breath he had no idea he had been holding. Ah, Hyuga Niji-san. I suppose it's good to see that powerful clans actually are still putting out powerful young ones. Your skills are clearly above that of a fresh shinobi. You received recommendations for Chunin almost as much as Nara-san did. Reason being why you are clearly physically Chunin level, at least your mind state is of concern. He looked down somberly as he could guess why people would question his mental facilities. Preaching fate all the time and being so narrow-minded at the same time was not a good or healthy combination. She stared at him, reading his reaction before shrugging. Well, I decided to promote you anyway. Just take up a hobby or something to work out those issues of yours. He was shocked, as he had not been expecting a relatively nice reason backing the fact that he was also being promoted coming from her. He gave her a deep bow, causing her to smirk. Thank you, Hokage-sama. I will do as you say and find something to occupy my mind so that I might perform my duties more appropriately as a Chunin. That's what I like to hear. Now, Rockley. She stood in front of him now, and stared at him oddly for a moment, getting lost in his fish eyes and voluminous eyebrows. She stared a little too long as her eyes started to twitch in frustration. She stopped to rub her eye as they looked at her weirdly. The umbu hidden in the room, even if they weren't sure how to deal with their new boss, still looked slightly sympathetic at her, as they figured she had almost fell victim to the youthful looks of the green beasts. Yes. Well, from what I've heard, you aren't very smart, brash, and a bit unfortunate to look at. Lee's feelings were visibly hurt as her words stabbed him, and the others wondered what that had to do with being a Chunin. Kuromi rubbed her chin in deep thought. But you were someone who was strong enough to surprise my Narukuin, and your power is clearly above that of a genin. Probably even a Chunin, but your body is still developing and so cannot maintain your peak of performance for very long or risk permanent damage. Well, I'm going to go on and promote you to Chunin anyway. Lee froze in his spot, going rigid, as he did not expect to get promoted at all. Truth is, no one recommend you despite the power you showed for the rank of Chunin. However, I don't care, so I'm promoting you because I said so. But you will not be promoted immediately. In a month's time you will be promoted, and during that time you will be attending classes on leadership and strategic warfare so that we can add some brains to that brawn of yours. Actually, you know what? Where is my assistant? There was silence in the room for a second before she looked at Hinata for a moment, who looked shy, and Kuromi seemed to remember something. Oh right, I don't have one yet. She moved back to sit in her desk and grabbed a pen and started writing. They didn't dare speak out how cute it looked with her holding the pen like a crayon and scribbling like a small child. Clearly she did not have much experience writing. She looked at the words and furrowed her brows, and though after a minute. Well, one of these words doesn't look right. Oh well. She pointed sharping to Hinata, causing the heiress to jump surprised. Mouse girl, remind me to send out a plan so that all new Chunins take classes that cater to various areas of strategy depending on what their flaws are, and a separate class for leading others. Okay, Hokage-sama. Hinata squeaked out, not commenting on the nickname, as Kuromi smiled, pleased at her response. Now to the final piece of business. Hyuga Hinata, you are not being promoted to Chunin. You did not fight in the finals, nor did you display ample enough skills prior to that to justify yourself as a Chunin. In short instances, when you fought Niji-san as well as when you helped your class defend the village against Skara, you did show both intelligence and skill. However, if I promoted you now, you would be at most a fodder Chunin, and I can't have that. Your confidence is also a reason to not promote you, but we can work on that. That's why I am making you my personal advisor. You will act as my most important assistant, my second voice, and at times I will also be personally training you. The guys all looked stunned, as did Hinata, as she didn't know how to respond. Seeing the girl not say anything for a long moment, Kuromi pouted and crossed her arms. Well, it's not like I'm forcing you to do this. You can refuse if you want to. I just thought you would be very useful to me. You also caught Naruto-kun's interest and you're quite cute, so I thought you'd be good to have around since I don't know who else I'd choose for an advisor. She said all that, but Hinata heard something else as she blushed. And Naruto-kun TT thinks I'm cute? That's not what I said. I'll do it. She raised her hand swiftly, causing Kuromi to look at her in a combination of both oddness and amusement, but she was still pleased with the answer. She clapped her hands cheerily. All right then, that's it. All males are dismissed from the room. So get out. Hinata-chan, you stay. The new Chunin all left feeling very confused. Kuromi glared in the direction of a particular shadow, causing it to shudder at her gaze. I said all males? That goes for the Umbu here too, unless you don't want to be male for very long. Gone with the wind they were, as they had a feeling she would not warn them again. Now then, Hinata-chan, can you come over her? Kuromi's smile slowly fell to a nervous one as she blushed a little. Hinata shuffled her feet slowly towards her in a meek manner, not sure what she would want. Why yes, Hokage-sama? Please call me Kuromi. Okay, Kuromi-sama? That made her happy as Kuromi nodded before looking away abashed and pointing at the scrolls on her desk. Could you please explain to me what the big words mean and how they are read? See cute. Hinata was lost. Was this supposed to be the dreaded nine-tailed demon? She was compelled to giggle but didn't dare. The next day was less eventful than the previous for Naruto, as he followed Jiraiya. At this point he had no idea where he was going and had never met the target, so he couldn't track her on his own, which meant he had to let Jiraiya lead. At least the old shit said that they were close. The woman liked to drink and gamble, that also really helped narrow down the places she could be. He absently followed Jiraiya, however, as he was stuck in his own thoughts. So there is a group of S-ranked shinobi who are after Kuromi and her siblings. There are a number of reasons as to why they are doing that, but right now that doesn't matter. I have to get stronger, not just so I can fight an S-ranked, but so that I can solo several at once. I need to master the Shunshin and figure out this sword of mine. Then my bloodline. Mastering my bloodline will probably take the most time. What about mastering my chakra? He wasn't startled by the sudden voice of Akami. I don't know if Kuromi told you, but I prefer to use only my strength. I'm not strong if the only way I'm effective is by using the power of someone else. Also, I don't have to train as much as others would to be able to use your chakra. We're naturally compatible. He smiled softly as Akami mentally rose an eyebrow at that. He suddenly went on alert as he picked up on a strong chakra level that far outpaced that of a civilian. Right never to that was another weaker chakra level that was also stronger than a civilian's. He opened his eyes and noticed at that point that they had just entered a bar. Tsunade? Jiraiya. He felt a sudden motion in the back of the bar and followed Jiraiya's line of sight to see a hot blonde woman. A hot blonde woman with a huge chest. He stared at it for a moment before he smirked. Humph. They sat across from each other as Tsunade grumbled, clearly not happy to see Jiraiya. Today is just full of old faces. That caught both of their attention, though Jiraiya knew exactly what she meant as the young lady. Shizen looked over at her worried. It was Yamada, wasn't it? What did she want? Tsunade stared at him hard before shaking her head and laughing it off. She just wanted to say hi is all. Why else? Che. Naruto snorted, causing Tsunade to look at him annoyed. Got something to say, brat? Only that you're really good at lying. How dare you dash? There are several tells someone gives off when they lie. A few of them I would have to actually know you to catch. However, it doesn't matter because I've met Yamada multiple times and I know the condition she was in when I last met her. So soon after that she wouldn't just come to you, the greatest medic in the world, just to say hi. Jiraiya laughed as Tsunade couldn't find a retort fast enough. And there you have it, I guess the kid got it in one, huh, Tsunade? How is this brat, Jiraiya? She stood up and pointed at him rudely. Naruto also stood up and grinned, flashing sharp teeth as he put a hand in his pocket. You know, you can just ask the person who you are speaking to who they are, but then the mistake would have been made that you so rudely never actually introduced yourself. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. You already know who my parents are, and I am here with Jiraiya to bring you back to the village now that our previous Hokage has died. She was more surprised to hear who he was rather than her teacher had died. Yamada had already told her about that. She shrugged off his introduction though. Really? I find that hard to believe. It would be a shame really if you were Minato's son because I'm already disappointed. But I suppose you got that brashness from your mother. If the village needs a new Hokage, they are shit out of luck because I don't want that position. The Hokage is a career for fools. She took a swig of her bottle of sake only for it to swiped by Naruto as he grabbed it and downed it quickly. Shizen was shocked as she wasn't expecting the kid to drink nor for his hands to move that fast. The audible gulps filled the air before he emptied the bottle and sighed before he shattered it in his hand, and slitted blues stared dully at Tsunade. Bitch, no one wants a washed-out drunk as a Kage. No, I'm only here to drag your dimpled ass back to be the new head of our medical corps as we are in need of your expertise, but looking at you now, well. Anyone can pour alcohol on a wound. You'd just probably be the only one in history to do it on accident. Jiraiya whistled as Shizen didn't know of any genin who would have the gall to talk to a Sanin that way. Tsunade's face shadowed as veins visibly bulged on her forehead, clearly feeling the heat of Naruto's roasting. Step outside, kid. Make me. Well, he asked for it. Before Jiraiya could stop her, she grabbed the front of his jack and threw him like a missile through the wall and out the bar. Naruto landed on his feet and skidded to a stop as the wind went by him. That tickled. Then get ready to die of laughter. Tsunade strolled out the bar, cracking her knuckles as everyone ran in panic. She held out her hand to him as he tilted his head confused. A Sanin like me against a genin like you? One arm will be more than enough for you. You Tsunade, I don't think dash. Shut it, Jiraiya, you aren't saving the kid from this. More like trying to warn her that the kid is more dangerous at close range and is not genin level. Naruto's face died down as it went expressionless, and he went into a light stance. I read that what made you actually effective on the battlefield with your healing was your super strength. But that strength is not natural and is created through the use of chakra. I wonder. His hands start crack and spiral with chakra, and one of his hands casually formed a Rasengan. His starburst blues glowing in a mesmerizing way in the low light. How long would it take for me to devour that too? Jiraiya had a bad feeling about it, and for some reason the boy's personality seemed a little different. Chapter 18, Short Bout. Tsunade looked a little bit wary of Naruto even in her drunken state. Somewhat because of his odd chakra that coursed along his arms, but more for his mouth. Shinobi with sharp demonic-like teeth like that, from her understanding, were always bad news. Coincidentally, they always had immense weapon talent or unique jutsu, and that included the Seven Swordsmen, the Gold and Silver Brothers, and from her personal experience, Hanzo. Naruto blankly started bouncing on the balls of his feet. Tsunade held her arm but rose an eyebrow at him, wondering what he might do as his chakra became visible every few seconds in the form of sparks going over his body. He leaned forward and took off in a sprint, causing Tsunade to falter, as she was expecting something bold and direct since he was just some dumb genin, but she was not expecting him to be that fast. She leaned back as he reached her and jumped up, doing a roundhouse kick as his foot barely missed her chin. He continued with it and pulled a dropkick down on her. She brought her hand up and flicked his foot. A small shockwave went out from the point of contact, and Naruto's eyes widened in shock. He was much stronger than the average person, yet she deflected him with a finger. All his momentum being cancelled out, he stayed there in mid-air for a second before falling back. She swung her open hand at him, but now he was getting used to her. The hand had a lot of stored power in it, but it was moving almost too slow for him. He wouldn't be able to move out of the way, but he could track her. He opened his own hand and pointed it at the ground and let out a burst of chakra in a white crackle. She flinched at the small noise as he suddenly paused in midair, causing her hand to move under him harmlessly. He spun in place and lashed his leg out again, but his heel stopped an inch from her cheek as she caught it with one hand easily. She grabbed firmly so that he couldn't get away and swung him down. He reached out to grab the ground and pushed forward, causing the ground to break around him as he stopped her from cratering him with the strength of his arms. The muscles bulged as she indeed was very strong. Chakra started swirling in the ground and around his hands as he formed a Rasengan with the ground itself, and he instantly spun out of her grip, sending out a barrage of helicopter kicks in an instant as she recoiled. He stopped just as quickly as he started and got back to his feet and moved back. He stumbled in his step repeatedly as he felt dizzy from that last action. That last counter of his sobered her up completely as she looked at him flabbergasted while shielding her face with her arms from his kicking. I'll give you one thing, you're a slippery brat. I'm much more than that. Raisendama. He formed a whitish Rasengan and held it over the ground in front of him, angled towards her. He held up his other hand and made single-hand signs and roared out. A shockwave came out of his mouth and passed over the Rasendama, taking it with it as they combined, and a torrent of force went down the street, tearing it up and sending chunks of earth her. They were half the size of her body, so she was not worried. Her fingers danced through the air as she used them to break apart and push the rocks away from her. In the cover of those rocks, Naruto appeared as she gasped. So you build up chakra into your limbs and release them at the point of contact. Sounds simple enough. His eyes glowed their brilliant blues as his arm coursed with chakra, lightning coursing over it as it hummed before he clenched his hand shut into a fist. Take what you give! Jiraiya, Shizen, and Tsunade's eyes widened to their limits. Fist met her arms, and the rebound came as Naruto's arm audibly crunched in on itself and fell down limply. His eyes shook as he looked down at it, taking a great deal of willpower not to scream out in pain at his bones being crushed like glass. Well, I'm disappointed. Tsunade took that moment to jab at him with her one hand while he was distracted. She stumbled a little when her hand almost made contact, but his head moved out of the way at the last second before he looked at her. She growled and jabbed at him lightning fast, only for him to avoid the next 3 jabs, all the same. At the last punch he missed it by inches as he saw it in slow motion, his eye following the fist curiously. A little more. She stomped down, and he lost balance, giving her the opportunity to punch him in the chest. Jiraiya panicked as Naruto went flying into a house and fell back in the rubble. He dug the boy and helped him up, grimacing at his swelling arm. I can't believe you were stupid enough to try and copy my super strength. Still, though, I have to give you credit. Even with being out of practice, I can still tell you have a monstrous amount of chakra, yet you were able to control it enough to hold it compacted in your arm for a few seconds. Too bad it looks like your chakra is pretty harmful. She got no response as a chain suddenly wrapped around her ankle. It broke out of the ground and quickly swung her into it, turning up dirt. She coughed as there was dust in her lungs. Then, she saw Naruto's feet suddenly appear in front of her at a speed faster than was possible for a kid. She looked up and started to shake as she saw Naruto with his face shadowed down on her, blood dripping down his head. The sight of blood. It would have been worse for me if I didn't use my reflexes to try and soften your punch. His other arm was fine, but his wrist was broken. The moment she punched him, he had moved his hand in the way and pushed back, so now he couldn't use both hands. And you already lost the fight since you said you would just use one arm, yet you used both arms to block, and you used your leg to knock me off balance. You're going to come back to Konoha, I'll make sure of it. You have a week to get all your affairs settled, but after that we are heading home. He paused a moment as he smelled an enormous amount of fear coming off the woman. I haven't done enough for her to feel so strongly. He'd save that thought for later as Shizen moved between them and started helping her master. So this is where the holding cells are? Kuromi looked around curiously at dank and murkiness of the corridors. There were a number of nondescript criminals as well as captured Sound and Tsunade. This was an area where criminals were held until judgment was given and they were sent off to the actual prison or executed. She shuffled down the halls with Hinata in tow, looking frightened by the atmosphere and the glares from the captives as she made sure to keep close to the demoness. Kuromi was getting annoyed by the Hokage robes. She read up on some information of the previous Hokages as well as information on the Kages of other nations and found that it was mainly just the really old Kages who wore their robes all the time. Younger Kages had their own signature clothing which seemed to diverge more and more from the traditional clothing the younger they were, along with the fact that their robes were tailored for them specifically. Kuromi's were not. Partially because it was a rushed order, and the seamstresses did not have time to make her one, but it seemed they were not completely willing to make her one either. She could make her own clothing, but it would be nice to have real clothing just for her, and not these spare robes she was wearing. The hat was nice though. She would get to that issue and either have Hinata persuade them to reason or she would go there personally. She thought over that again and shook her head. If she killed any of them, that would just make it take longer for her robes to be finished. Still, her clothing that could be worn in both a casual and combative setting was something she could have made right away with the various shops around and in the village. So this is where the sand container and his siblings is being held. Kind of dumb to hold the container of the only bijou that can grind solid matter into sand to use as a weapon in an underground sale, especially since a simple chakra sealing tag won't last long on any Jinchuriki, I'd imagine. She stood in front of the cell and saw 2 Chunin standing guard. I will be going in the cell here to greet our captives, so would you be kind enough to move? One of them sweated as the other actually glared at her. I only follow the orders of my superiors, not freaks of nature. Hinata instantly panicked but couldn't bring herself to dissuade the situation. Kuromi cupped her chin and nodded in thought. I see. Since you're new here I've been working here for 5 years. New to me, and I'm in a good mood, I'll overlook this. After all, I'm your superior and you don't throw a tantrum over a single, insignificant, worthless ant, now do you? Her eyes narrowed at him, goading him as she grinned evilly. The man glared at her at the insult as he reached his hand for his tanto on his back. His body froze on itself as a delicate, dangerously sharp nail tilted up his chin. You were about to raise a hand to your Hokage. That is a crime punishable by swift death. You should thank me, I just saved your life? The man still glared at him when she looked at him expectantly. Her patience was running out, and she grabbed his shoulder and forced him on his knees as the ground cracked and stabbed her fingers between his ribs. I said thank me? The man now choked out fearfully as her nails were dangerously close to his heart. The other guard backed away now as he knew better than to speak out as he cowered. Why you? Thank you, Hokage-sama. I'm just a useless bitch that needed to be shown my place. He was silent for a second until she pushed her hand further and slowly, and he literally got the point. Thank you, Hokage-sama. I am just a useless bitch that needed to be shown my PP place. Very well, I'm glad I could help. She yanked her hand out as blood coated her fingers and the man crumpled to the floor holding his bleeding wound and really from the physical and emotional damage he had just been dealt. She turned her head to the other guard who flinched and spoke out sweetly. Now could you please open the door before I use your body to do so myself? Why yes, right away, ma'am. He was definitely smarter than the other one. Ma'am? I like the sound of that. The door opened and she walked in. The 2 older siblings of Gaara quickly noticed her and stood up on guard. Hello, as you know I am the dreaded Kyuubi, she said sarcastically, but I am also now this village's Hokage. I'm not here to speak to you, however I'm here to talk with the redhead who is resting on the bed. Gaara slowly opened his eyes and turned his head to look at her from her spot on the bed. Hello, Kuromi-sama. She smiled as this was a good start. I see you have much better manners now that you have gotten some rest. Well, I'm here to bring you good news. You are free to go back to your village along with the ninja of your village and have been acquitted of all your crimes by me. Temari rose an eyebrow, feeling this was all too good to be true, as it wasn't a smart decision, and it was too generous for someone who was supposed to be a demon. What's the catch? Kuromi snapped her fingers and Hinata fumbled with the scroll in her hand. She dropped the scroll and squeaked out, causing Kuromi to sweat drop at the moment being ruined, her eye twitching as she didn't dare look back at the mouse child lest she regret what she would do. After a lot of fumbling, Hinata picked up the scroll again and pulled out a seal that she placed to the wall, and a pulse of chakra went out showing it was a privacy seal. Kuromi looked back at the girl drily as Hinata looked embarrassed, hurriedly apologizing. The fox woman sighed and looked back at Temari. Can you repeat that question for me, please? Temari looked confused but did so. Oh, okay. What's the catch? Yes, the catch. What is the catch? That is a great question. The girl's sweat dropped now at the dramatics but broke out in a cold sweat, as did the others in the room when all of her tales flared out. Your village will need a new kage, and your container will be the best candidate for it. The catch is, you work for me now. They all went stock still and Hinata dropped her scroll again. Are you proud of me, Naruto-kun? I can make surprising decisions too. The next morning came and Naruto sighed as he stretched his arms, not an injury marring them. He went through his morning exercise as he got his body in sync. He closed his eyes and opened them slightly as they turned orange. My body isn't durable or controlled enough to use that hag's techniques. He flexed his arms after a certain thought went through his head, and a layer of black covered them with a metallic sheen, and chakra chains started to slowly grow out of his fist. But if I'm not durable enough, then I'm just not using all that I've learned enough. Chapter 19, 3 Sanin. The hell? So the doctor is afraid of blood? Naruto rose an eyebrow, not fully believing Shizen. The young woman had come to him and Jiraiya on her own to apologize for Tsunade's actions and tell him a few things. Shizen's eyes kept moving up and down as Naruto kept periodically hopping. Jiraiya sat cross-legged on a nearby stone, silent. She had to nod. He was surprisingly light on his feet as his steps seemed to use hardly any energy from the rest of his body, releasing it in short bursts, so he only made contact for a fraction of a second with the ground. I told you losing loved ones is part of the profession of a shinobi and should be expected when you have family members who are also shinobi. I'm not gonna be a dick and say she needs to suck it up, but damn it, she's had what? Decades to grieve? She needs to suck it up. Jiraiya's sweat dropped at that. Well, things can have a lasting psychological impact when you consistently believe in the positive only for the absolute worst to repeatedly happen. All of her loved ones who wanted to be Hokage died bad deaths. My Uncle Dan, her brother Nawaki, the late 4th Hokage, Uzumaki Kushina. She got a little heated as while she understood Naruto's responses she was going to defend her teacher from disrespect. Naruto stopped hopping at the last name and Jiraiya looked away and sighed. Naruto gave a soft smile and put his hands on his hips as he looked down. So my mother wanted to be a Kage too, huh? Shizen gasped as she remembered his clan name. Gomen, it was insensitive of me to mention them. I'm not gonna make that big of a deal about it. I could have been nicer too. I'd like to hear some more about my mother sometime though if you remember anything. I know you're not a lot older than me, so it's probably reaching. She nodded and eased up, smiling. Sorry, I was young, so I only met her a few times and don't have very many memories of her. I can tell you though that she was a very beautiful woman and would have made an amazing mother. A gathering of robed figures appeared in a holographic display. One that seemed to be the leader of them stood forth. Report. Itachi and Kisame looked unperturbed as they told him what happened. That Gaki is pretty impressive for his age. His body is pretty tough, and he seems to have some potentially impressive jutsu. The little shit took a bite out of Samah too, of all things. Kisame grinned. He was also interested in the boy simply for the fact that his teeth resembled his own. Also, he seemed to say that only one person was important to him, and that they were female. He said this person was the one we were trying to take away from him. Several of the other cloaked beings stumbled as they quickly figured out what that meant. The man Itachi was speaking to had his ringed eyes widened slightly. So the bijou, or at least the 9th one, have genders, and its host is possibly quite close to it. Hey, this may be a coincidence, but we've found something interesting. A plant-like person with 2 different colored halves rose out of the ground. Their name was Zetsu. We have recently learned some things. Apparently the Leaf Village's new Kage is a woman, and she's openly known as the Kyubi. Kisame had a look on his face that was obvious to read. WTF? The ring-eyed leader looked over at the plant person with a look of disbelief. How do we know that this woman is truly that beast? Well, a lot of the village treats her with contempt. We were able to spy her a couple times with added appendages that look like fox ears and tails, and the energy she gives off is too strong for her to suddenly come out of nowhere. Did you attempt to capture her? Not even close. Before we could even try her, it's like that demon could detect us instantly within a certain range of her. She didn't know we were there exactly, but she suddenly went on guard and started giving off a presence of death. We would not have been able to capture her quietly. If anything, she would have killed us. Pain looked unconcerned as a masked man off to the side narrowed his eyes at this news. No matter. If she, as unbelievable as it sounds, has become the Hokage of her village, then it's likely she won't be moving around for some time. We can more easily target her when the time is right, as long as she stays put. If the situation calls for it, capturing her former host may prove to be an excellent bargaining chip. If there is nothing else you have to report to me, we will conclude this meeting. The man vanished along with everyone else. Itachi, Kisame, and Zetsu, however, all kept what they wanted to say to themselves. I am interested in seeing how you grow, Naruto-kun. I can tell the future will be resting with you. That Gaki was definitely different. He ate my sword and has the same bite. If things were different, I wouldn't mind mentoring him in the way of the sword. That child. He gives off a similar feel to Mother. This is worth looking into. Maybe the plan can go off sooner than projected? Years it had been. She bit her thumb as she felt nostalgic. Several days had passed since that little bout with that brat, and she couldn't stop reflecting on it. He really did mind her of Kushina with that brute brashness. Yet at the same time he was a lot smoother with his words, like Minato was. If Kushina had the balls, then Minato had the grace. Her mouth twitched in amusement at the odd thought. Together they made an odd combination that was Naruto. Someone who had the balls to say whatever he wanted and the brains to understand exactly what he was doing. In her mind that was both a good and bad thing, as she knew firsthand that he could be incredibly annoying, but she supposed if she were in his shoes it could be strategic to have that kind of disposition where you can easily bait your opponents. The fact that the boy was very strong on his own probably took a lot of the stress out of the situation. He definitely would have lost to her in an all-out fight, minus the blood issue she had. But he didn't falter at all, and he had her respect for that despite things. She wasn't completely sure what his psychological state was, but strength-wise he had the potential to be a powerful Kage. A Kage? It's what Dan and Nawaki had wished to become. It was their dream. She may be a little spiteful with her words, but she didn't hate the idea of someone being a Hokage. She more along the lines hated the pain that came with being a shinobi. But then who actually enjoyed that? You seem to have a lot on your mind? A voice playfully hissed at her, as she was snapped out of her musing. Yamada looked amused as she was in Tsunade's face, who was so clearly out of it. Yamada leaned back and snickered. Meanwhile, Tsunade beat herself up mentally, as she knew that being so unaware could get her killed quickly, especially with being around her estranged teammate. Well, you are here at the scheduled time. Am I correct to assume that you agreed to my terms? Yamada had a fever, a light one at best. Clearly a side effect of surviving a Reaper death seal with only minor damage. That minor damage being the loss of her right arm, shown by the darkened skin that was currently wrapped in bandages. It was her dominant arm, so it was a setback in a number of ways, but it wouldn't be for long. Besides, she also had Kabuto with her for whatever aid she needed. I'll do it, just make sure you bring them back. Yamada smirked and held out her hand as Tsunade walked forward. Just as they were inches apart, a kunai came whistling through the air right at Tsunade's head. Another one came even faster from above her, hitting it, causing it to be deflected at Yamada as they jumped apart, causing it to miss her just barely. Kabuto made himself known behind Yamada as Naruto appeared on top of a fence near Tsunade with his hands in his pockets. Yamada looked at Kabuto for a moment, already figuring out what was going on. So you plan to trick me, Tsuna-chan? Don't you want your dear lover and brother back? She growled as she steeled her nerve. They wouldn't want to be brought back through such means. It would be a desecration to their graves. Well, that's a shame. Looks like we are enemies again. It's nice to see you again, Naruto-kun. She gave a smile to Naruto, who just looked at her blankly and shrugged before turning to Tsunade, ignoring her. So are you going to tell me what part of your weathered mind thought it was a good idea to try to take on Yamada along with her assistant? You're out of practice, she isn't. Yet you drugged all three of us last night. Jiraiya and Tsunade felt like connecting for a bit over old times and were drinking along with Tsunade. Only reason why Naruto drunk was to not be treated like a kid. Tsunade's eyebrow twitched at this brat's mouth. How are you even moving about already? Well, I have to hand it to you, that little drug you made, I didn't notice it till it was already inside of me. You really are a medical genius. And it lasts all of 10 minutes. He may have sounded like he was mocking her, but he wasn't. That drug was supposed to last 10 hours. Well, I guess my body has a metabolism that's 60 times faster than your standard ninja. I also burned it out 10 minutes before I went to sleep, so I don't even have a hangover. Jiraiya was already stirring though, but very drunk when I got up. I'm guessing he'll be here soon. He spoke like he wasn't really that concerned or worried with the matter. She had no idea why, but then she noticed his appearance. He still had on his dark high-collar short-sleeved hoodie with orange trim and gray pants. His sandals were black but tied around his calves and forearms, leaving the ends of his fingers exposed where bandages. You know, Naruto-kun, I should thank you for your help. If it weren't for you interrupting my old sensei, he may have succeeded in sealing more than just my arm. Things could have been much worse off for me. She chuckled before a shiver came over her. Naruto directed his gaze at her, and his eyes flashed a different color. In that split second, she thought she saw someone with white hair and the purple mask of the Shinigami hanging on the side of her face, strapping herself over his shoulders and leaning on his back, grinning at her. Oh, so this is kind of my fault? You know I could get you your arm back. They looked at him surprised as Naruto held his hand out. You brat, what are you doing? Jiraiya showed up, landing on the fence with Shizen behind them, all only for him to lose his balance and fall off it, landing on his face, the drug still affecting him. Naruto ignored him as he kept his position up with his hand out to Yamada. You can do that? He nodded his head. What is it you want then? I never said I would do it. He dropped his hand and his mouth twitched as Yamada looked annoyed. Akami snickered in his head at the snake woman's expression. There are many things I can do. Doesn't mean I do them. Hell, I could do you. Yamada expected him to say more on that as they all looked at him expectantly, only for him to just look at her blankly, clearly having no intention of saying anything else. Yamada sighed, getting annoyed. I suppose it's just one of those days. She shook her head a little as she felt a faint buzzing in her ears, as did everyone else. Kabuto, please take care of our fox boy. I'll deal with my old teammates. Boom! The ground where Naruto just was exploded as he went through the air fast, about to stomp on Yamada. Kabuto moved in front to block him as Yamada jumped high. A gust of wind went out as Naruto's foot met Kabuto's forearms as he blocked. Your kick may have been without warning and without a lot of power, but you have too much of a presence to fully surprise high-caliber shinobi. I was hoping someone would block me. His face shadowed and fangs gleamed. The ground cracked before giving away. As if Naruto had a rocket powering him, Kabuto was only able to stop Naruto's moment from the flying stomp for that single second before the force continued as Naruto transitioned into a diving kick and Kabuto was pressed with his back into the ground as they went sliding across the ground through several walls and into a house, destroying it into rubble. The Sanin and Shizen all looked shocked as Naruto just up and checked an elite Jonin level fighter. Yamada looked like she was about to wet herself as her cheeks went rosy on her pale skin. Such a strong body. Jiraiya looked at her with a dry expression as he got up. You know, would it be too much to ask you to just go? He really wasn't in the best shape to deal with this woman. Do I get the boy if I leave? Tsunade didn't know how to feel, realizing she had already been forgotten. That's not my decision to make. Oh, so if I can get Naruto-kun to come with me, it's okay? I didn't say dash. Naruto-kun! She shouted at the wrecked house. No! She dropped her hand a bit crestfallen, causing the other two Sanin to actually look a bit amused. Naruto did have high sensory skills related to sound, so it was likely he could understand what they were saying perfectly without him being there if he was only that far away. No matter, I can be very convincing. Though it would be easier if I had both hands to convince him with. Tsunade-chan, if you would be a dear? Tsunade didn't move, just glared at her. Yamada sighed and grabbed her lame arm. She lifted its hand up to her mouth and bit it hard enough to draw blood. She held the hand and Tsunade froze up as her pupils constricted and she quivered, getting Shizen's attention. Alright, Tsunade's been defeated, your next Jiraiya. Jiraiya's sweat dropped at how callously she dealt with Tsunade taking advantage of her weakness. Though he figured by the nature of what they were, blood was going to show up in the fight eventually. No, Jiraiya. Go away. His sweat dropped grew. She may be the strongest of the Sanin, but fighting them would still take a while. Naruto balanced on one foot inside a wrecked house. Kabuto picked himself up, smirking as he spit out some blood. That kick broke several of his ribs, but his body healed fast. You cut the tendons in my heel at that short moment my attack landed? You're good, Naruto, but don't think you'll have an easy time. We'll see about that. He did a sensory scan of his body and felt his injury healing, but slower than usual. Must be from the very precise application of chakra. You want me to fix that? He heard Akami's voice in his head, her voice soaked with a half-hearted sense of disinterest. What would you get out of that? She wasn't exactly as openly accommodating as Kuromi had become. He also hadn't reacted with her long enough to not be at least a little suspicious of her. What? I'm not allowed to do things simply to relieve some boredom? Hey, I just wanted an answer. Your reasons, I don't actually care that much. I'm not one to jump to using Kuromi so easily, the same would apply to you. He continued to balance on one foot and shifted his side to Kabuto and held his arms up in his stance, palms facing his person. His fighting style was flexible and his body was adaptive, so being down a leg wasn't going to stop him by a lot. Kabuto rose an eyebrow as he looked at Naruto, intrigued at the sight of a genin calmly adjusting his posture while taking a debilitating energy. Kabuto took on the offensive. If he dealt with Naruto quickly, he could capture him and take him to his Yamada. Maybe she would also let him run some test on the weird boy. Naruto leaned back as the wind went by him, barely avoiding Kabuto's knife hand from his face. He slid back on one foot and rolled his tongue around in his mouth. There was an audible crunch and pop in his mouth as his eyes fluttered a second before he spit out to the side some blood and a couple molars. The chakra scalpel left no mark on his face, but it had cut some of the inner lining of his cheek and severed a good bit of the gums in the teeth he just spit out. It's hard to calculate the range to dodge. The use of chakra is light enough to be hardly noticeable by my sense, yet it's precise enough to be deadly. Good Kami, this guy didn't study Tsunade's super strength. Kabuto was also too fast. Being in close quarters with the snake-style medic was not going to help him. His eyes shone brightly the blues like a bright day before they shifted to its brilliant sunset gradient. He started feeling everything around him in finer detail as nature also felt him better. I'm not going to make this easy for you, glasses. The boy was emanating an odd power now as Kabuto went wary. He was surging energy. Naruto filled his lungs quickly, causing Kabuto to rush him, intent to stop him from doing whatever he was trying to do. Naruto felt him thought, and quickly snapped back, flexing his whole body. A shell of chakra pulsed out from his body, blowing Kabuto back a little, giving Naruto the time he needed to act on the man's short stagger time. Naruto dropped down to one hand and spun his uninjured leg out, kicking Kabuto back into the wall of the house and through it. Naruto jumped up through the collapsing wood roof, shooting clean through the air. As he was airborne, he got a clean look at Yamada, fending off both Sanin, who frankly couldn't do much to her. Tsunade herself wasn't really putting up a fight at all. It was Jiraiya who was picking up the slack. He sent a pulse of chakra from his body opposite of them, and he aimed at them. Jiraiya paused mid-jutsu as Yamada looked towards the small noise. Naruto let out more pulses to keep his speed up, making up for his disabled leg as he hopped across the ground towards Tsunade, her attention catatonic from the blood on her. Naruto got an evil grin as he was feeling a sense of payback. He held his hand back and it started to blur as it vibrated intensely. Wake up! Slap! Naruto touched down, and at the same time brought the full weight of his hand across Tsunade's face. Her head reeled as the others looked shocked. A ripple of wind went out and Naruto was impressed. Tsunade stayed standing as she leaned to the side. Buzzing went through her ears before her eyes refocused, and she righted herself again. The blood wasn't bothering her that much now. What did you do, Hie? She held her cheek in pain as her eyes teared up. Damn, it stung. Are you paying attention now, or do I need to slap your ass next? Naruto had the audacity to say that without a completely unperturbed or hinting expression at the lewd implications. She glared at Naruto, still cradling her cheek. He boredly raised his hand up, and she flinched at the motion. That's what I thought. Naruto went alert again as Kabuto was behind him with a scalpel to his spine. Naruto flipped this time, completely avoiding it. He went on both his hands and swung his legs at Kabuto like maces. The man was able to smoothly deflect each one before the force of it sent him sliding back a bit. Are you having a hard time, Kabuto-kun? Yamada's voice hissed with amusement as Kabuto looked a bit apologetic. Sorry, but his reaction speed is insane. Oh, you haven't seen anything yet. Naruto finally gained an excited look on his face. Oh, please show me more. Yamada licked her lips, her long tongue making Naruto lapse a bit as he shivered. She bit her hand again and formed signs before running the blood along the seals on her other arm. Their eyes widened as they knew what was happening, Kabuto jumping towards her. Tsunade quickly grabbed Shizen and jumped away. Jiraiya did the same while Naruto backstepped. Boom! There was a huge explosion of smoke as a massive snake made itself known. Yamada? What is it now? Manda's voice boomed out, annoyed. He had been in a bad mood ever since he found out she chose not to summon him to attack a village. Though considering what happened to the snake that did it, may have been better for him not to show up. Well, you see, Manda, look at that boy down there. The boy whose hair looks like it had been kissed by the sun goddess herself. Kabuto and Manda actually sweat dropped at the description, but he looked down. Naruto looked up at the snake curiously. Manda was impressed such a hatchling could stare up at him so calmly. He'd make a great summoner for them. He's the container of the Kyuubi and as of late my new person of interest. I see. He knew what she wanted now. He wouldn't complain this time. The boy seemed interesting enough to be worth the trip. They were stopped from their conversation as two more explosions of smoke occurred as a giant slug and toad also appeared. Naruto looked up blankly at all of them. You know, I feel so out of place right now. He placed his foot down finally, it having healed enough for him to walk again. You could always release me, you know. I'd help. That might be too excessive, and I can't tell if releasing you so soon at that level would kill me or not. Surprised her that instead of outright refusing her, Naruto seemed to have actually considered his options. Besides, I still want to have some fun. He jumped up the toad, quickly scaling the massive thing in seconds. Jiraiya, who was ready to ignite some toad oil, blinked at the boy who now soared up over him. His orange eyes started leaving a glowing haze behind as he charged his chakra with nature chakra as well, causing the three boss summons to recoil. What kind of senjutsu is this? It definitely wasn't pure, but it wasn't far off either. Naruto touched down on Gamabunta's head. Work this time. He squatted down and angled towards Manda's head. Calculate trajectory. Speed can be ignored once it passes the specific threshold of this distance. All other estimates should be unnecessary. Braking will be via impact. Shunshin added to my chakra and techniques. Shooting star. A shockwave went out as Naruto blurred forward with his pulse-based Shunshin. A split second later he crashed into Manda's nose. The snake winced a little as it stung, tilting him back slightly. Naruto righted himself to jump off the nose and land on top of it as he let out a breath. Well, it worked that time. He was stopped as Yamada closed on him and grabbed him around the neck as they both fell down the snake. You continue to amaze me, Naruto-kun, but it looks like you couldn't avoid me this time? He was about to retaliate when Yamada was forced to let go. Drop him. Tsunade sailed right between them with her heel hitting the snake hard, causing Manda to curse. She turned around and quickly grabbed Naruto like luggage and ran up the snake. Yamada had a dark look on her face at her former teammate stealing Naruto from her. She gagged out as her kusanagi emerged from her throat, and she grabbed it, giving it a few test swings before dashing at Tsunade full force, fast than Tsunade herself could move. Yamada had always been the fastest. Tsunade gasped out in pain as she was impaled from the back through her lower abdomen, causing her to drop Naruto. Yamada was about to move from Tsunade to grab him, but Tsunade recovered from the pain fast enough to rip her sword out of her and grab Yamada's leg. She then roared and threw Yamada all the way up to crash under Manda's snout. All that hit was some mud, as it was shown to be a clone. Tsunade was then struck across her face as Yamada punched her. Naruto, as he kept falling, was then caught by Jiraiya. "Phew, got ya, kid." That rescue was short-lived as Tsunade's body crashed down into Jiraiya's back, causing Naruto to go flying up again. Kabuto, Shizen, and the three boss summons all exchanged looks at each other, not sure what to do, as the Sanin basically played keep away with Naruto's body. Which was something he didn't like at all. A tick mark grew large on his head as Yamada came for him now to grab him. The expression on her face was that of arousal, and in this kind of situation that wasn't something he wanted to see right now. Enough! A black chakra chain erupted from his lower spine like a tail, which wrapped around her legs. He held his hands up in a hammer fist, and the bandages on his forearms burst off as black erupted up them, and a giant executioner blade formed in his hands. He swung it straight down at Yamada, intending to bisect her, but she blocked him with one arm with her kusanagi. Her blade actually started cutting into his own, however. While the Sanin was indeed physically strong, one arm was no longer enough to hold back Naruto's strength. She wasn't sure if two would have even been enough anymore as she was smacked back into Manda's body. She glared at Naruto and shouted, "Manda!" He blinked as he had forgotten about the snake's purpose there. A half a second was all it took for Manda to focus on him, and lunged down, snapping Naruto in his jaws whole. The others paled as Yamada succeeded in at least one of her objectives. Good, now take him back to the summoning dash. Bam! There was a roar from inside Manda's mouth before a booming noise went out, and Manda's mouth shot open as an extremely powerful blow hit the roof of his mouth, causing some blood to flow. Naruto had a shit-eating grin on his face as he went into the air, having punched out of a giant serpent. Tsunade's eyes widened as she saw a younger version of herself, Minato, Kushina, and her grandfather all overlapped Naruto for a second. She looked at his arm and saw it bleeding in places, but still mostly workable. She didn't know how he did it, but Naruto had actually been able to recreate her super strength to some extent unknown. Manda, who had already started the recall to his realm, had been too startled to stop it, as 2 seconds later he disappeared in smoke. Naruto landed on his feet as his sword fell from the sky, stabbing right next to him, and put his hands in his pockets, grinning as the upper half of his face shadowed. Yamata's lip quivered as she stopped herself from whining or whimpering. She really didn't want to leave Naruto here, especially after what she just saw, but the odds were getting bad now. She didn't get her arm healed, she didn't get Naruto, and now she was all hot and bothered. "Kabuto, we are leaving." Kabuto was instantly on her side and they shined away. Naruto stood there till he could no longer sense them and relaxed. "I've got your scent down to memory now. It will be hard for you to hide around me anymore." His arm started to spasm on its own and he felt dizzy and very tired. Holding his head, he stumbled as Tsunade was quickly on him trying to help. As the adrenaline passed, he didn't remember much else that happened after that. "Say my name." The sound of whipping could be heard in the council room. Cries and curses could be heard before a lash went out again. "Say my name." Kuromi. Another lash went out, even harder this time. Kuromi-sama. People in the council were a rainbow of expressions. Some looked horrified, some looked amused, some feigned impassivity, some were flat out laughing, such as Inazukatsu. One of the civilian heads had disrespected Kuromi too much for her liking. Really, it was just them saying they hated demons and the color red. How dare they hate red? So now she was whipping the man. Wait, that's not completely accurate. She was having the man whipped. By Hinata. The soft mouse girl she was to Kuromi, she kept looking back at her a little shakily in protest, only for Kuromi to single her to whip the man again. The expression that made it look like Hinata was about to cry from uncertainty and embarrassment as she against her own wishes whipped the man. Well, Kuromi would be lying if she said the cute girl and the scene in general wasn't fueling her sadism. Again, my assistant. Mao. She whipped the man again but wasn't paying attention and lashed the man's tailbone. Oh! Hinata went blue in the face from disgust as the man surprisingly now shivered in pleasure, moaning out. She looked back at her boss, hoping she had the same reaction, only to pale as Kuromi seemed to rub her chin curiously. Maybe this has gone on for too long. Still, though, exploiting the masochistic side of this waste of meat could serve to further humiliate him in public. Well, we've come this far, no point stopping now. Hina-chan, get him to say my full title. Yes, acknowledge your Hokage. The girl comically cried as she shakily held up the whip to crack again. I don't want to do this anymore. Right when Hinata was about to swing, Kuromi blinked as a voice made Hinata go rigid. Kurama, Kuromi the Kyubi no Yoko, what the hell are you doing? Hinata, seeing Naruto drop the whip, trying to look as innocent as possible, which in a sense she was. Kuromi, saw Naruto standing at the door with two Sanin on the sides of him and some older girl with black hair. She didn't care, she just knew what she had to do. Naruto-kun! She tackled his chest and nuzzled him hard, causing him to stumble a little before smiling fondly at her, and removed her kage hat to pat her head and rub her ears, causing her to purr lightly. The civilians and elders were flabbergasted, as were some of the clan heads. The rest of the clan heads didn't know how to feel. They were only starting to come to terms with the fact their village was getting ruled by the most powerful demon. Now they see her acting like a lost puppy / schoolgirl in Naruto's presence. This was too weird to make sense of. Tsunade's eyes were comically wide as she kept pointing at the demoness ears and tail, and looked at Jiraiya, who just shrugged. I miss you, to Kuromi. The killing intent in the room suddenly became visible as Naruto gulped when Kuromi grabbed him by the front of his jacket and held him up off the ground, 9 tails flowing behind her intimidatingly. You dropped the leadership role of this village on me and then ran away. You knew exactly where I went. I didn't know when you would even be back. It was only like 2 weeks. That's like a day for you. That's not the point. This job was so stressful. Do you know how hard it is to govern a village of meatbags? Naruto glanced over at the man who was still writhing in pleasure from his lashing, then at Hinata, who blushed in embarrassment, and looked away. You seem to be doing fine. Don't look at them, look at me. She could feel herself losing ground as her voice lost its edge. Gladly. She blushed a little at his random casual flirt. Don't you know that even a D-day without you is like an eternity for me? She looked away a little bashful. Naruto's eyes widened astronomically at that. Did she just stutter? What is this cute act? He blushed for a second before his mind kept going and he went calm again. Wait a minute. Stuttering and cute in ways uncommon to Kuromi? What changed while I was gone? He then remembered something and glanced back at Hinata. Kuromi sweated a little seeing his line of sight. Don't look at her. So she's your assistant? Fun. Kuromi sighed and dropped Naruto. She could only try to trick him so long before he caught on. Still, she was more than happy that he was back. So was your mission successful? Yep. He thumbed over at the blonde women who flinched now in the presence of a demon. I bring you Tsunade, the supposed best healer. Kuromi looked the woman up and down. She was a bit taller than the woman, so she leaned down a little as she stared closely at her face, making the woman nervous as she sniffed her. Kuromi then rubbed her chin and held a hand under the woman's breast, causing people to gasp as Tsunade's eyes widened, feeling molested. Kuromi lifted it in her palm a little and squeezed lightly, making Tsunade bite her lip to stifle a bit of a moan. Nice weight to these things. But you are hiding your appearance? We are going to have to fix that later. Tsunade paled, not sure what the fox meant by that, and shocked that her appearance was seen through that easily. Hospital. Kuromi sat behind Naruto, hugging the back of his head to her chest as Tsunade read off a paper. For whatever reason, she requested that Naruto be at the hospital ASAP. Of course, Kuromi wasn't going to let him out of her sight so soon. So why am I here? Is my iron levels low? He joked. Yes and no. He blinked at that, not being serious. What? That black metal you have stored in your body to make that sword of yours. It's largely composed of iron. When you use it, you already have an extreme concentration of iron in your body, but it's not enough, so you end up basically starving your body of iron when you remove your sword from your body. When you reabsorb your sword, it actually takes a bit of time for your body to fully assimilate it. Now, that's not that big of an issue. The issue is it doesn't use very much of your own chakra, so it's seen as foreign to your body, which causes negative effects on top of those. You're suffering from extreme metal poisoning. It's because of your high healing that you are even able to go most of the time without showing any symptoms. However, this will only get worse as time goes on. Damn, he really liked his cursed blood sword thingy too. There had to be something he could do, or else he would need to get rid of it. Because some of it has also seeped into your bones and is still being seen as foreign, there is a high chance it will stunt your growth. Well, sword, we had a good run, so what's the solution? I'm going to need both of your help in removing the metal from your body. As of right now, that should be around 50 kilograms worth. You really shouldn't even be alive. The metal must literally be your blood, and if that's the case, it poses an even bigger problem. It's always something. He would roll with it. In the background, where no one could see, Neo floated above, looking on at the scene in interest. Chapter 20, Changes. Well, nothing has burned down. Naruto mused as he walked the streets of the village. Even though he had only been gone a few weeks while Kuromi was Hokage, he wasn't sure what state the village would be in when he got back. He knew she could handle it, but at what cost was something he couldn't guess. Currently, he would say this was the best-case scenario. Villagers quickly noticed his return, and he noted the different looks he got. Some full of awe, other full of confusion, no doubt from people finally being able to physically see that he was not the fox, but also confused why the fox was the one in office. There were, of course, still a number of gazes filled with contempt for him. Not that he cared. He did note that there was more looks of awe and admiration now than there were prior to the exams. He got the same looks from women, though, if albeit with a bit more intensity. He walked through the front doors of the hospital towards the surgical wing, ignoring the front desk receptionist with a glance. He noted the receptionist was fairly cute. Short dark hair and not much older than him. She looked startled by him moving past her without a word, but upon recognizing him, she resigned to silence. There was no contempt detected, just acceptance that there was no issue, which in his book was a good first impression. Going through the different wings, he knew where he was supposed to go, or rather he had a general idea. He could feel Kuromi, Tsunade, and Shizen in the hospital, all in the same general vicinity of them, so a simple deduction would tell him he should just go to where they are. He made it to a pair of dark double doors with a couple umbus standing guard. They noticed him and stood a little straighter as he nodded to them in a silent greeting. He made his way past them through the doors and saw Tsunade doing some small tests on Kuromi. What kind, he had no idea, as for all intents and purposes she was a bijou. Ah, Naruto, good morning. I hope you have prepared yourself for this operation. Tsunade backed away from Kuromi and moved to a clipboard as she motioned him to a bed to lay on. He moved over and laid down without much protest. So how are we doing this? The metal is part of my body, right? So I'd imagine this won't be easy even for you to do, right? She came over to him with her hands glowing green with chakra as she activated the mystic palm technique and scanned his body. Well, interestingly enough, most of the metal was never properly absorbed into your body. In your bloodstream, it's bonded to the natural iron deposits, and for the most part harmonized with your body. However, your organs are another problem. There are solid bits of metal in your stomach and shrapnel in different parts of your body hitting your organs. That's where a lot of this problem you are having is coming. Your body seems to have two different types of immune systems. Your own chakra breaks down foreign substances, which seems to prevent a lot of things from even affecting you. If not for this cursed metal probably would have killed you early on, but your chakra broke it down into small enough pieces to either be digested or absorbed into your body. Hasn't done so completely, but it did a good enough job. Your other immune system is the more normal and biological one, however the level yours operates at is of course much higher than anyone's. Your own cells and body tissues seem to have coated these different shrapnel of metal scattered inside your abdomen in a layer of some kind of mucous membrane. This prevents it from doing much more harm to your body. However, when you get injured and take a strong enough blow to the body, Tsunade glanced at him and Naruto was able to figure out the rest. So that barrier my insides are putting on the metal ruptures in fights and then the metal probably nicks something, starts to grow, and then everything goes to shit? More or less. Fantastic. So I know where I have to remove the big pieces, but what's in your bloodstream I can't do much about. If I did, it would probably be unbearably painful, and I may damage something inside you in the process. Yeah, let's not do that. There is still another negative, however. Because of your metabolism and healing factor, it's gonna be hard to cut into you without you feeling it or being conscious. Naruto paled quite noticeably upon hearing that as Tsunade started taking out some alarmingly huge res traits covered in chakra seals to keep him in place. That's okay, I'll just get Kuromi to turn off my healing. Huh? Kuromi looked confused and tilted her head at him, lost. It would have been cute if he wasn't so nervous right now. I can only turn off any effect to your body that's not your own. At this point, while your healing is several levels greater than it would have been naturally, it's naturally a part of you now. I'm not actively doing anything, so there isn't much I can shut off. While you could at least look concerned for my peace of mind. He deadpanned at her, wondering if he should lock her back up. Then he remembered Akami was already in his head watching everything. She had been oddly silent actually, but he was aware of her internal gaze. I'm sure it will be fine. This woman is a professional, right? Kuromi and Naruto's eyes snapped to Tsunade, who now felt uneasy at the attention as she stuttered. Alright. I'm a pro, but it's not like I've done this before. That didn't fill me with much confidence. Tsunade coughed into her hand as she opened a personal scroll of hers and made a hand sign as multiple large vials of strange liquids came out. Well, I did plan for this. I only had 1 day to make this, as I don't exactly keep this level of sedative on me, but it should work. It's my own concoction for anesthesia, but much stronger and slower to metabolism. It's strong enough to put an elephant in a coma for 2 days or kill 200 people on contact. She could have sworn she heard Naruto whimper right there and felt killing intent from Kuromi, as she quickly continued. But I won't let you die, of course. I made it this strong and thick specifically for you. Your body's combination of immune systems and metabolism should break this up a lot before it even gets into your system, so I had to make it very powerful. This will also be injected into you progressively. However, for safety reasons unique to literally you, the most I will put you under will be to put you in a perpetual lucid state. You shouldn't feel much more pain than you can handle from this, maybe even less than that. But after the operation, the stress of this all will probably hit you hard, and you may be in a state of fatigue for several days to a week. Naruto calmed down with that, not so much concerned by the last part. Well, then I guess we might as well get on with it. He said that and half regretted ever saying that. He was under for only about an hour. He had to hand it to Tsunade, she really was good at what she did. He knew that firsthand after having fucking felt her hands all over his insides. Really, he knew he would be aware, but having someone cut you open and play operation with your vital organs may have been more nerve-wracking than the actual pain. She didn't have to worry about stitching him up much. Just stopping the bleeding and pasting the wounds together with a surgical adhesive paste also of her own making to keep them from getting infected. They probably would not get infected, but she was a doctor, and that was due process at least. After that she bandaged him up, and Kuromi, who had left the room to take care of minor Hokage duties, had returned to dote over him. She was glad the fox woman left, because having her present would have made Tsunade too nervous lest she mess up while cutting open-tailed beast's lover. He would probably be sore for a bit of time, as his immune system would be in a degree of shock from that operation, but Kuromi could help him out on that end probably more than she could. He already looked so out of it, like he was about to take a long sleep at any minute. Tsunade pulled a chair in front of the two as Kuromi sat next to Naruto, who chose to keep laying on his back and just turned his head to Tsunade instead. Now for the test I got on you two. Kuromi-san already knew what I was doing, but I did some extra tests on your blood work for the hell of it after what I got with her and found some unprecedented results. Okay, and? Well, I did blood tests on her. Naruto rose an eyebrow at that, not really getting the issue. Okay, and? I drew blood from what I thought was chakra construct. Kuromi and Naruto slowly had the gears turning in their heads on that for different things. That's not supposed to be possible, right? Well, to an extent it might be, but I'd imaged the blood I sampled would either dissolve into a tailed beast's harmful chakra or could be turned back into said chakra. To an extent it did, but not completely. Most of the blood I was able to turn back into energy, but a fraction of it remained like a person's, and that's where I discovered that while still largely unstable, Kuromi somehow did indeed have DNA. Kuromi furrowed her brows in small annoyance. I do not know what that is. What is this DNA I have? For simpler terms, it is a component that exists in all living things and is necessary for the reproduction, regeneration, and reconstruction of organic matter. By human standards, you are now officially classified as a living being, not just some mass of chakra. I guess that is good? Kuromi shrugged, not really caring what the ants that were humanity considered her. But there also does not exist a living being on the planet that can't be killed by some kind of conventional mean. Kuromi now paled at that, and Naruto's eyes constricted as his senses went out to make sure no one in a 100-meter radius was a threat or listening in. He was able to sense right away that the room had double the privacy seals on it. Tsunade thought ahead. Good for her. Naruto sat straight up, ignoring his protesting body, and had a completely deadshot serious gaze on Tsunade that actually made her break out in a cold sweat. How is this happening? And my only guess is that the relationship you have with each other, whether it's the interaction with your unique chakras, the seal placed on you, or something else, that is what is causing the change. I say this because you yourself are experiencing a similar but more opposite change. Your own DNA has fallen apparent a bit but remains mostly stable. However, your DNA is covering itself, even the unstable parts, in a layer of protective proteins, which is an evolutionary trait or mutation non-existent in people, and from that an abundance of energy is being given off in every cell. It's almost like your body is trying to become a human-tailed beast. So I'll be harder to kill and Kuromi will become a target. I don't think so. At least not drastically. This has never happened before, so I can't be sure, and I will keep this a secret as long as possible, as eventually others may figure out the changes if things progress. But you are already naturally harder to kill in the first place, and for Kuromi-san it's hard to say what this means for her. Bijou will respawn eventually after death. Maybe she will die easier but still respawn. Maybe she will be harder to kill but unable to respawn. Maybe she will be more like you. Maybe she has a lifespan now. Maybe something else entirely. I don't know, but I don't think someone sure as the Kyuubi has to worry about much, especially if she is in the village. Naruto groaned out in acceptance but not nodded, while Kuromi didn't seem too sure what to think. Tsunade fished out a glass jar with chunks of metal in it, and handed it to Naruto. Here, a souvenir. Interestingly enough, some of the metal absorbed the matter in blood and other pieces was absorbing chakra. Please be more mindful of what you eat. I would rather not have to do this again. Believe me, I don't want to come here again. He jingled the metal in the jar a little as he stared at it a second longer. Well, you can leave at any time now, but I suggest you stay on light duty. However, I'm sure our Hokage can make that decision for herself. Tsunade looked amused when Kuromi responded to that by smirking back at Naruto. Naruto walked the halls of the hospital without any real direction now. He definitely needed to get some rest soon, as he felt like he was gonna keel over. He fingered the chain around his neck, glad that it was still there. It was a good thing that his chakra chain stayed in place as long as they kept contact with his body, and stayed in the last form he arranged them in. If the chain had shattered, he probably would not have attacked anyone. His control was too good for that, but he may have still caused Tsunade to lose her hands from contact with him. Everything went monochromatic, and he stopped in his step to look to the side to see Neo floating there boredly. It's for the best that this procedure happened. Your presence and soul is a lot more stable because of it. Weak but more stable and recovering. And just like that, she left, and color returned to the world. Well, good morning to you too, Neo. It was a little odd getting used to how she could just pop in and out at any time. Continuing in his path, he had absent-mindedly walked towards someone familiar. He stopped at an open door to see Sasuke in a room with medical tape and gauze on his arms and the side of his face. They were from the burn wounds from the run-in with Itachi. They were nothing serious, however, and thanks to Tsunade would clear up after around 2 days. Yo. He waved to Sasuke, who nodded in acknowledgement. The young Uchiha, however, didn't seem to be in a conversing mood. A darkness clouded his eyes as he wallowed in his own contempt. Naruto assumed it was also Itachi related. He could cheer him up, but that served no purpose for him. He wanted Itachi dead, and if the Uchiha shared that goal, then he could make use of it. However, he didn't feel like exploiting him yet. Maybe after some rest he would take advantage of him. That was fine with Naruto, since as he wanted to sleep right away anyway. Next day, Naruto, as to be expected, was already at the training grounds. He should have rested longer, but the way he saw it, his body was like a toy. There was so much he could do with it, and it was honestly fun for him. He wouldn't do anything too crazy, however. He was off from duty for a few days and wanted to enjoy it in more ways than just training. He did enjoy the alternative, which was lazing about and sleeping, but he wanted to do a few other things as well. It's only been a day, but I actually feel more like how I did back when I was in Danzo's little think tank. Naruto flexed his hand for a second before grabbing the chain around his neck on a whim and shattering it. Feeling unhindered, his body quickly jumped overboard as his eyes glowed white and his body's aura started to darken. The pressure around the vicinity greatly magnified as Naruto himself looked like he was being electrocuted, trying as hard as he could to reel himself in. He was able to stop himself from progressing further, and after a few seconds it died down back to normal, and he let out a cold sweat. I wonder if that's how Lee feels when he activates his gates. His eyes were their dynamic, vibrant blues. Ever since awakening this weird bloodline of his eyes have permanently changed. He could shift how they looked depending on what mode he took, but so far none of them actually took a toll on his body as long as he wasn't in an intense fight. Naruto took up a simple stance and calmed his breathing, just listening to everything around him. Without warning, he flexed his whole body, and the area around him cratered from the force of his chakra. Naruto grinned at the results as he checked his body over. That didn't hurt at all. Looks like I have finally adjusted properly. The removing of all that metal in my body must have aided in that. An Umbu appeared not far from Naruto in a crouch, right outside the crater. Naruto-sama, my apologies for the interruption. Hokage-sama has requested for your immediate attendance. He wasn't sure why Kuromi would be calling him now. Surely she could have told him that morning, since they lived together, or even told him mentally. Either it was very important, or she was just enjoying ordering people around just because she could. I believe now is as good a time as any. Promotions have been handed out already for the exam results, but as you were not in the village, I could not go over it with you. Kuromi folded her hands on her desk as Naruto stood there in front of her in her office. Hinata stood to the side of her, looking away shyly from him as she held a few books in hand. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. So who got promoted? If I remember their names right, it would be Shikamaru, Niji, and Lee making Chunin. You already know Hinata is my assistant now. Rock Lee? That's a bit surprising? While Niji is a little shaky because of his logic as a choice, Lee is frankly a brick. Yes, I thought so too, which is why I had him take instructional classes for a few weeks now to at least be able to function in the minor leadership duties of a Chunin. That's pretty smart. She smiled a little at the small praise. However, now there is the matter of you. I don't think there is anyone in the world with at least a normal level of intelligence that can say your power isn't Chunin level. Hell, it's Jonin level, and you are growing very fast. You also have the intelligence to lead thanks to your own talents and probably Danzo. However, he rose an eyebrow at her pause, wondering why she didn't just promote him. Sure, he was more than good enough. Plus, she wouldn't want her lover to have such a minor rank, right? He felt uneasy when she gained a sly glint to her eye. A leader should be able to access the situation but potentially make sacrifices that are the most optimal for the success of the mission. However, you pretty much operate exclusively. So we are going to do a little test right here, right now. Why couldn't you tell me this morning? Your Hokage is speaking, so you should listen. She spoke a little sharply, which surprised him a little. Akami, who had basically been zoning out into sleep in his head, woke up to watch the scene herself after hearing that. I don't think you've convinced me enough that you would be an ideal candidate for a rank up. However, I'm sure if you put on a show, I'd feel more inclined to do so. Plus, this could help with getting Hinata a little more relaxed. He wasn't completely sure he understood what he meant until she tossed him a bottle of baby oil, and suddenly he looked scared to Kuromi's glee, not believing what she was asking him to do. Hinata took a few seconds to catch on before she suddenly gained a nosebleed, but did not look away from him for a second, which made him very uncomfortable. No. Yes. No. Yes. Yes. He heard Akami echo her other in his head, sounding just as aggressive and excited. Akami, shut up. Kuromi, I'm not a stripper. I'm sure you would be good at it if you tried. Do your best, and Naruto-kun. See, the mouse girl wants it too. Both of you shut up. Kuromi was enjoying the moment too much as her tails flared out. Dance for me, boy. I want to see that ass shining. Now glaze up before I cavity search you. He paled at that there and reflexively clenched his ass cheeks at that threat. Kuromi's sexually assaulting aura instantly faded and she went back to normal. Naruto, if you do this, I'll let you fuck my ass right here, right now, on top of the mouse girl. Huh? Hinata almost broke her neck as she looked wide-eyed at her boss. while in my kage robes, and the girl can also join in if she wants. Hinata was about to protest, but her mind was at war with herself, as her nose bled even more heavily as she had to cover it with her hand and fell to her knees as his legs gave out in embarrassment and arousal. Naruto also was at war with himself as he stared at the bottle of baby oil in his hand. Akami kept shouting, "Do it!" in his head, and he was feeling bullied oddly enough, but then he really wanted that ass. But would he degrade himself for that ass? Along with fresh meat Hyuga girl added to it to sweeten the deal? Will he really ignore his pride just for a double helping of fresh ass? Fuck yes. Without another word, he unscrewed the bottle and poured it on his head, feeling it running through his hair and into his clothes. A moment later, the doors bust open as the daimyo entered the room with his guards. They all paused mid-step to see Naruto's state with his shirt already half off. "I can explain? Can you?" The daimyo looked like he had to take visible effort just to ask that, as he wasn't even sure what an answer to this could even be. Naruto glanced back at Kuromi to see her covering her mouth, struggling to keep herself from laughing and half failing to do so, and Hinata passed out on the ground. "Actually, I don't think I can." The daimyo nodded, somehow understanding, and coughed into his hand. "Well, I came here because I heard a demon had been made a Hokage, so I came to meet them." "Well, there she is." Naruto gestured to Kuromi, who waved, still amused, as the daimyo looked confused as to why anyone would call such a beautiful woman a demon. Then he was reminded of the scene he just saw and looked back at Naruto, who was still feeling uncomfortable. "Do you do entertaining? You see, I have a granddaughter who is around your age and is having a birthday approaching soon. I was wondering if you would be interested in dash." "No." Naruto had never felt so insecure in his life. "Don't worry, you would be paid well. A young lad such as yourself is surely worth a lot." Naruto's insecurity was instantly replaced with curiosity and a degree of shame. How much? He wished he had not responded so quickly, because that was all it took for Kuromi to openly start laughing at him. The daimyo remembered where they were and had the decency to look apologetic. "Sorry, maybe I should get to the real purpose as to why I'm here first." The umbu hiding in the corners all couldn't help but chuckle amongst themselves. A cat-masked umbu whispered to another nearby umbu, "You know we really have the best jobs." "I know, right?"